The Thornfield home stood on Maple Avenue for 47 years, a Victorian beauty with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch where neighborhood children gathered for lemonade on summer afternoons. Edgar had restored every inch of the 1,890 structure with his own hands. Inside those walls, Miriam had raised 3 children: Jasper, their responsible firstborn; Daniel, the daredevil middle child; and Rebecca, their artistic daughter, who married an Australian diplomat and moved to Melbourne. The first blow came 10 years ago when Daniel's military transport was shot down over mountains half a world away. The folded flag presented at his funeral still occupied the place of honor in their living room. 5 years later, Rebecca announced her permanent relocation to Australia. "It's just too far to visit regularly, Mom," she explained. "But we'll video chat every Sunday, I promise." The promises gradually stretched from weekly to monthly to occasional holiday calls, each conversation ending with vague plans for visits that never materialized. Then came Edgar's fall. At 75, he had no business climbing onto the roof to fix a leak, but stubborn pride prevented him from calling a professional. "Why pay someone $300 for something I can do myself?" he argued when Miriam protested. The hospital bill after he slipped from the ladder came to $45,000, emergency surgery for a broken hip, a metal plate, 8 screws, and weeks of rehabilitation. Their Medicare covered barely half, and their supplemental insurance had lapsed the previous month when premium increases outpaced their fixed income. "We'll manage," Edgar insisted, face gray with pain. "We always have." But the medical bills coincided with the economic downturn that hit Jasper's custom furniture business. Orders dried up as luxury spending collapsed. The bank began sending foreclosure notices on both his workshop and the family home. When Jasper confessed his financial troubles during a hospital visit, Miriam noticed how he couldn't meet his father's eyes. "The kids might have to change schools," he muttered. "Josie's beside herself about it. Says her friends will all know we've failed." "We could sell the house," Miriam suggested. "It's too big for just us anyway, especially with your mobility issues during recovery." Edgar's face crumpled momentarily before he regained composure. "What about your garden? Your quilting room?" "Plants can be transplanted," she answered, voice steady. "And I can quilt anywhere there's a table and decent light." 2 months later, they signed the papers selling their beloved home for enough to pay off their medical debt and save Jasper's house from foreclosure. The furniture business would still struggle, but at least his family wouldn't lose their home. The day they packed the moving truck remains etched in both their memories, Edgar methodically dismantling his workshop, Miriam wrapped china that had survived 5 decades of family gatherings. When she reached her grandmother's teapot, her composure finally broke. Edgar found her sitting amid bubble wrap and newspaper, cradling the porcelain piece, tears falling silently. "We've had a good run in this old place," he said, easing down beside her. "Made enough memories to last several lifetimes." She leaned against his shoulder. "I know it's just a house." "But it's not just a house," he corrected. "It's where we became who we are. But Miriam, we take that with us wherever we go." Rusty, their 10-year-old golden retriever, sensed the upheaval. He followed them anxiously from room to room as furniture disappeared and boxes accumulated. When the final room was emptied, he sat in the center of the living room, bewildered by the hollow echo of the space. "Come on, old boy." Edgar patted his leg. "We're going on an adventure." The adventure led to Jasper's guest bedroom, a space clearly designed for occasional visitors, not permanent residents. The queen bed barely fit alongside a small dresser, leaving narrow pathways to navigate. Their remaining possessions filled the garage, with only seasonal rotations allowed inside due to what Josie called space limitations. Jasper and Josie's home in Oakridge Estates boasted 5 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and a backyard large enough for a swimming pool and play structure. By any objective measure, space wasn't actually limited. Priorities were. Initially, Josie maintained a veneer of welcome. She arranged a small housewarming dinner their first night, complete with flowers and Miriam's favorite lemon chicken. "We're so grateful you're here," she said. The children are absolutely thrilled to have their grandparents close by. Indeed, 5-year-old Ivy and 4-year-old Finn seemed genuinely delighted. They raced into Edgar and Miriam's room each morning, jumping onto the bed for stories and cuddles before school. "Grandpa, will you build me a bird house like the old house?" Finn asked. "Grandma, can we bake cookies today, the kind with faces?" Ivy would request. These moments offered glimpses of joy amid the adjustment period. But within weeks, subtle changes emerged in Josie's demeanor. It began with small comments during meal preparation when she thought Miriam couldn't hear. "I never signed up to run a multi-generational household," she complained into her cell phone while chopping vegetables. Then came the adjustments to accommodate their temporary situation. Miriam's comfortable armchair, brought from their old home, was relocated to the basement. "We need the space for our new entertainment center," Josie explained. Edgar's remaining woodworking tools, once neatly organized in the garage corner, were tidied into boxes and stacked behind holiday decorations. "The children need space for their bikes," was the explanation. Meals became exercises in passive-aggressive commentary. "Edgar, you're welcome to have seconds, of course," Josie would say with a tight smile, "though the nutritionist at my gym says men your age should reduce portions to match decreased metabolism." Or, "Miriam, I've switched us all to almond milk. I read that regular dairy can accelerate memory issues in seniors." Jasper witnessed these interactions with uncomfortable silence, occasionally attempting weak interventions that inevitably trailed off under his wife's sharp glance. "Viv, I don't think my parents need dietary advice from your gym buddies," he began once. "I'm only thinking of their health," she interrupted. "Don't you want them to be healthy?" And that was that. Jasper retreated, choosing the path of least resistance. The children remained bright spots. Ivy would slip into the guest room after school, backpack bulging with papers. "Grandma, can you help me practice my letters?" she'd ask. Finn brought broken toys for Grandpa's magic fixing hands. Rusty adapted as best he could, claiming a corner of the guest room and following Edgar and Miriam throughout the house like a furry shadow. Josie barely tolerated his presence, muttering about dog hair on designer furniture and the smell of wet dog even when Rusty was perfectly dry. The first real crisis came 3 months after their arrival. Edgar awoke at 3 a.m. needing the bathroom. Still not fully confident with his healing hip, he moved cautiously through the darkened room. His slipper caught on an unfamiliar throw rug Josie had placed there, sending him crashing against the bathroom door with a cry of pain. The household erupted. Lights flashed on. Jasper appeared in pajamas. Children peeked fearfully from their doorways. Josie emerged last, hair perfectly arranged despite the hour, lips pressed in a bloodless line. "Is everyone all right?" Jasper asked, helping his father to his feet. "I'm fine," Edgar insisted, though his hip throbbed alarmingly. "I just lost my balance for a moment." "This is exactly what I was worried about," Josie said. Jasper flinched. "Dad just tripped, Viv. It could happen to anyone. At 3 in the morning, when everyone need their sleep for work and school tomorrow." She turned away, adding over her shoulder, "We'll discuss this in the morning." The discussion never materialized, but the next day, Josie scheduled a home assessment with a company specializing in senior modifications. The evaluator walked through the house, making recommendations that somehow always involved limiting Edgar and Miriam's movements rather than making spaces more accessible. "We could restrict nighttime bathroom visits with an evening fluid management plan," the young consultant suggested, avoiding Edgar's horrified expression. "Or perhaps adult undergarments would be appropriate," Josie added thoughtfully, as if discussing weather rather than her father-in-law's dignity. That evening, Edgar sat on the edge of their bed, shoulders slumped in defeat. "I never thought I'd become a burden to my own son." Miriam laid a hand on his arm. "You are not a burden. You raised that boy, put him through college, helped with the down payment on his first house. If anyone has the right to occupy space in his life, it's you." But even she was beginning to doubt their decision. Each week brought new evidence that they weren't truly welcome. Invitations to family outings mysteriously excluded them. Conversations halted when they entered rooms, their suggestions about household matters ignored or dismissed. Most telling were the grandchildren's innocent questions. "Mommy, why do you make that face when Grandma hugs me?" Ivy asked. Josie's smile froze. "What face, sweetheart?" "I don't make any faces." "Yes, you do," Finn chimed in. "Like when I eat broccoli and try to pretend I like it." The table fell silent until Jasper forced a laugh. "Kids say the darndest things, right?" But the observation hung in the air, undeniable in its clarity. Children see truth adults prefer to ignore. 5 months into their new living arrangement, patterns had solidified. Edgar and Miriam had become experts at making themselves scarce, retreating to their room or taking Rusty for long walks when Josie was home. They'd learned which floorboards creaked, which times of day were safest for using the kitchen, which topics would trigger Josie's thinly veiled hostility. Edgar found refuge in the local library, where he volunteered teaching basic woodworking to children on Saturday mornings. Miriam joined a senior center quilting group that met 3 afternoons a week. These activities provided necessary escapes from the mounting tension at Jasper's house. The children remained their allies, though Josie increasingly limited their interactions. "Ivy has ballet on Tuesdays now," she would announce. "And Finn starts soccer on Thursdays. They won't be home until dinner." The activities multiplied until nearly every afternoon was scheduled, effectively eliminating the after-school hours Edgar and Miriam had treasured with their grandchildren. More concerning were the changes they noticed in themselves. Edgar's confidence had eroded. He second-guessed his movements, apologized constantly, and avoided using common areas whenever possible. Miriam caught herself speaking in whispers even when Josie wasn't home, as if her very voice might cause offense. Small memory lapses that once would have been laughed off became sources of anxiety. When Miriam forgot, she'd already watered the houseplants, causing minor overflow onto the hardwood floor. Josie's reaction was disproportionate. "This is exactly what I've been noticing," she said. "These episodes are happening more frequently. First the stove left on, now flooding the plants. It's concerning, isn't it?" The stove incident had been a single occurrence when Miriam had been distracted by Finn falling and scraping his knee. She'd turned off the burner immediately upon remembering, but in Josie's retelling, it had become a near-catastrophic event. Edgar noticed these exaggerations but felt powerless to counter them. Each time he attempted to defend Miriam, Josie deployed the same technique. "I understand you want to protect her," she would say. "That's admirable. But denial doesn't help anyone, especially with conditions that can progress rapidly at her age." Jasper, caught between his wife and his parents, increasingly sided with Josie, not overtly but through silence and absence. He worked longer hours, attended weekend business functions, and when home, retreated to his office or basement workshop. The workshop had become a particular point of contention. Edgar had asked once if he might set up a small workbench in one corner to resume some of his projects. "That's Jasper's space," Josie had replied. "He needs somewhere to decompress, especially with the extra stress lately." In early June, a hot Sunday afternoon found the household in a rare shared occupation. Jasper was grilling on the patio, Josie supervising the children in the pool, Edgar resting in a shaded chair, and Miriam arranging a fruit tray in the kitchen. Through the open window, Miriam overheard a conversation between her son and his wife. "They've been here almost 6 months now," Josie was saying. "How much longer is this temporary arrangement going to last?" "What do you want me to do?" Jasper sounded weary. "They sold their house to save ours. They have nowhere else to go." "That was their choice," Josie countered. "You don't think watching your son lose his home and business is force enough?" "All I'm saying," Josie continued, "is that there are options for people their age, communities designed for seniors, places with appropriate care levels. We can't afford assisted living, Viv. Their social security barely covers their medications and personal expenses. That's why they're here. There are government programs, Medicaid. They'd have to be destitute to qualify. Is that what you want? For my parents to have nothing?" Of course not. I'm thinking of everyone's well-being. The children need space to grow. We need our privacy back, and your parents need proper care from professionals. Miriam stood frozen, a fruit knife suspended over half-cut strawberries. The conversation confirmed what she'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. In Josie's mind, they were unwelcome intruders with an expiration date. That evening, she relayed the conversation to Edgar as they prepared for bed. "She wants us gone," she concluded, voice steady, "and Jasper isn't exactly fighting to keep us." Edgar sighed heavily. "Maybe she's right, Edgar. Not about sending us away," he clarified, "but about us being a burden here. This arrangement isn't working for anyone. Jasper's caught in the middle, the kids are confused by the tension, and we're walking on eggshells in what's supposed to be our home too. But what alternatives do we have? Our savings went to medical bills and helping Jasper. Our house is gone. We're too old to start over with mortgages and jobs." "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know we deserve better than being treated like problems to solve rather than parents to cherish." They fell asleep that night with questions unanswered and hearts heavy with uncertainty. The turning point came exactly 1 week later. At precisely 11 p.m., Miriam jolted awake from a troubled sleep. Voices drifted up from below, Jasper and Josie talking in the kitchen. Their tones were hushed but intense, carrying through the old heating vent near their bed, already toward Sunset Manor. Josie was saying, "It's perfect for their needs." Miriam nudged Edgar gently. He stirred, blinking in confusion, until she pressed a finger to her lips and pointed toward the floor. Understanding dawned as he registered the voices. $4,200 a month, Josie continued. "Their Medicare won't cover half of it, but here's the thing: once they're declared incompetent to manage their finances, we become their legal guardians." "Declared incompetent?" Jasper's voice sounded uncertain. "On what grounds?" "Doctor, Martinez already said Edgar's depression after the fall, combined with Miriam's memory issues, should be enough. He's sympathetic to our situation. You've discussed my parents with our doctor without telling me." "Someone had to take initiative," Josie replied. "Look, once guardianship is established, their monthly Social Security, Edgar's pension, the insurance payout from their house, it all comes to us to manage their care. Josie, they gave us everything to save our house." "Exactly. And look where it got us stuck with them 24/7. Edgar can barely walk, Miriam's losing her mind, and I can't even have friends over because they're always here. The kids need their own space to grow. But Ivy loves her bedtime stories. Jasper, grow a backbone. Your daughter will adapt. Kids are resilient." Josie's voice sharpened. "But I won't spend my prime years as a nursemaid to your parents. I've already spoken to a lawyer about the competency hearing." Silence fell below. Miriam and Edgar remained motionless, scarcely breathing as they strained to hear more. "When were you planning to tell me about this?" Jasper asked. "I'm telling you now," Josie answered. "The appointment with the lawyer is Tuesday. He says the process can move quickly with medical support. And what about my parents' wishes? Don't they deserve a say in their own lives? That's the point of the competency hearing, Jasper. To establish they're no longer capable of making sound decisions. Look at the evidence: Edgar's depression, Miriam's memory lapses, her confusion with medications. Dr. Martinez has documented everything. You've been building a case against my parents? I've been documenting legitimate concerns, Josie corrected, for their safety and ours. Do you want to wait until something serious happens? A fire from a forgotten stove? A fall that breaks more than a hip? Their conditions will only worsen with age. They're not invalids, Viv. Not yet. But they're heading that way, and I refuse to let our lives be consumed by their decline. I need time to think about this, Jasper said. Think quickly, came Josie's reply. The hearing date will be set this week. In their darkened bedroom, Edgar and Miriam remained frozen in horror, hands clasped together so tightly their knuckles whitened. Minutes passed before either dared speak. She's planning to have us declared incompetent, Edgar whispered. To take control of everything we have left, Miriam nodded. Not just institutional care against our wishes, it's financial exploitation. Elder abuse, Edgar agreed. They sat in stunned silence as the full weight of betrayal settled around them. Not only were they unwanted, but they were now targets of a scheme to strip them of autonomy and assets under the guise of concern. Jasper seemed surprised, Miriam noted. Maybe he'll stand up to her. Did you hear him mount any real defense? His strongest objection was about Ivy's bedtime stories. What do we do? Miriam whispered. We leave. Leave? Where to go? With what? Anywhere but here? With whatever we can carry. His voice strengthened with determination. I'd rather sleep under bridges than surrender my dignity and watch you be declared incompetent by that woman. Miriam's initial shock gave way to quiet calculation. We have some emergency cash from selling my mother's jewelry, and I've been doing odd repair jobs at the library. Haven't told Josie about that income. Edgar's expression was grim but focused. When? Miriam asked. Not tonight. We need to plan this carefully. 3 days to gather resources and decide what's essential. 3 days, then we disappear before they can take our freedom. They spent the remainder of that night whispering contingency plans, listing resources, and confronting the harsh reality that at ages 75 and 72, they were about to become essentially homeless. The following 3 days passed in a strange dual reality. Outwardly, they maintained their usual routines. Edgar visited the library. Miriam attended her quilting group. They interacted minimally with Josie and respectfully with Jasper, but each excursion now served a strategic purpose. At the library, Edgar withdrew his modest volunteer stipend, which he'd been saving in a separate account Josie knew nothing about. He quietly said goodbye to the librarian who'd become a friend, explaining he might be traveling soon. Miriam used her quilting group meeting to convert her remaining jewelry, her mother's pearl earrings, and her own gold bracelet into cash through a discreet sale to a fellow quilter's jeweler son. They made inventory of their medications, calculated how long current supplies would last, and researched options for refills without insurance in new locations. They studied bus routes and fares to neighboring states, debating destinations based on climate, cost of living, and distance from Jasper's potential search radius. Most heartbreaking were their preparations for the grandchildren. Edgar spent evenings carving a small wooden bird for Finn, with intricate feather details that showcased his finest skills. Miriam baked Ivy's favorite cookies, testing and perfecting a recipe that could be recreated even without her guidance. They composed careful letters explaining their departure without revealing the bond of the five, true catalyst. The children were too young to understand the complexities of adult betrayal. Better they believe Grandma and Grandpa had gone on an adventure than know their mother had orchestrated their expulsion. On the third night, as the household slept, Edgar and Miriam executed their escape plan. They had packed 2 small suitcases with essentials, changes of clothes, medications, photocopies of important documents, and the few irreplaceable mementos they couldn't bear to leave behind. Daniel's military photograph, Rebecca's childhood drawings, a thumb drive containing digitized family photos. Rusty sensed the unusual activity. The old dog watched with anxious eyes as they moved quietly around the room, whimpering softly when they attached his leash at an hour he'd never been walked. "Shh, good boy," Miriam whispered. With a precision born of recent practice, they navigated the darkened hallway, avoiding the creaking floorboard outside Jasper and Josie's room. They paused at each grandchild's doorway, Edgar placing the carved wooden bird on Finn's windowsill, Miriam leaving a tin of cookies on Ivy's bedside table. Descending the stairs in stockinged feet, suitcases carried between them to distribute weight, they moved like shadows through the kitchen. Edgar placed his house key on the counter, a symbolic surrender of the space that had never truly been theirs. Rusty's nails clicked once against the tile, freezing them in place. From upstairs came the sound of movement, a bathroom door opening, water running. They held their breath until footsteps retreated and a door closed. At precisely 12 a.m., they slipped out through the side door, eased it closed without latching, and disappeared into the June night, the warm air carrying the scent of jasmine from neighbors' gardens. "No turning back now," Edgar murmured. Miriam squared her shoulders. only forward. They walked 6 blocks to the bus stop serving the night route, their pace slowed by Edgar's hip and the awkward luggage. When they finally sat on the bench to wait, the reality of their situation hit with full force. "We're homeless at 75 and 72, Edgar said. Miriam took his hand. "We're not homeless, we're houseless. There's a difference. Home is us, together, making our own decisions." Rusty settled at their feet, his warm presence a comfort in the uncertain night. Above them, stars punctured the darkness like tiny beacons of possibility. Whatever came next would be difficult, but it would be on their terms. In that moment, dignity outweighed security, and freedom felt worth the sacrifice of comfort. The city bus arrived at 1 a.m., its doors hissing open to reveal a sleepy driver who barely glanced at the elderly couple as they boarded. He did, however, notice Rusty. "No pets allowed unless they're service animals," he stated. Edgar straightened to his full height, summoning dignity from somewhere deep within. "He's my emotional support animal. For PTSD." The driver shrugged, too tired to argue. "Keep him under control." They settled into seats near the back, Rusty curled at their feet. As the bus pulled away, Miriam watched Jasper's neighborhood recede through the window. The elegant houses with their manicured lawns grew smaller until they disappeared altogether, swallowed by darkness and distance. "Where to?" Edgar asked. "First, we need a plan for tonight," she reasoned. "Let's find somewhere safe to rest until morning. Then we can make better decisions." Edgar nodded. The adrenaline of escape was wearing off, revealing the vulnerability beneath their brave decision. As the bus rumbled through sleeping neighborhoods toward the brightly lit downtown, something unexpected flickered within them, both a sense of possibility not felt in years. They had reclaimed agency in their lives. Whatever hardships lay ahead, they would face them together, unbowed by Josie's schemes or Jasper's weakness. The downtown bus terminal at 2 a.m. presented a harsh introduction to their new reality. Harsh fluorescent lighting cast everything in sickly yellow, highlighting dirt and desperation in equal measure. A handful of overnight travelers dozed uncomfortably on plastic seats, while security guards eyed everyone with equal suspicion. The smell of industrial cleaner barely masked underlying odors of unwashed bodies and fast food. Edgar and Miriam found seats in a corner, positioning their luggage between them like a makeshift barrier. Rusty settled at their feet, his presence drawing occasional glances from security. "We should inventory our resources," Edgar suggested. Miriam nodded. "I've been tracking everything." The tally was sobering. 847 from Miriam's jewelry sales, 312 from Edgar's library work, 2 bus tickets to anywhere, approximately 340 remaining cash for survival, roughly $800. Edgar murmured. "Good. How long will that last us?" "Depends where we go and what we find. A cheap motel might be 60-70 per night. Food, perhaps 20 daily if we're extremely careful. That gives us about 2 weeks before complete destitution. 2 weeks to recreate a life at our age." A cleaning woman pushing a cart paused nearby, her dark eyes taking in their situation with a single glance. She was perhaps 50, with streaks of gray in her black hair and lines of exhaustion etched around her mouth. "You folks okay?" she asked, a Hispanic accent coloring her English. Miriam offered a thin smile, just waiting for the morning bus. The woman, Mercedes, according to her name tag, looked pointedly at their luggage, then at Rusty, then back to their faces. Understanding dawned in her expression. "Terminal closes to non-travelers at 3, she said, "but it reopens at 5. Security makes everyone leave, checks tickets when you return." She hesitated, then added, "There's a diner 3 blocks east that's open all night. The owner, she doesn't mind if people sit a while if they order something small." Edgar and Miriam exchanged glances. "I could use some coffee," Edgar said, understanding the gift they'd been given direction, however temporary. They gathered their belongings and made their way out of the terminal, Rusty trotting dutifully beside them. The night air had cooled significantly, a reminder that even June could bring chilly pre-dawn hours. Sunny's all-night diner belied its cheerful name. The establishment was clean but worn, with cracked vinyl booths and a counter where a few solitary figures hunched over coffee cups. A bell jangled as they entered, drawing brief attention before patrons returned to their own concerns. They selected a booth near the back, positioning their luggage discreetly against the wall. Rusty settled underneath the table, invisible to casual observation. A waitress approached the same Mercedes from the bus terminal, now wearing a different uniform but the same expression of understated compassion. "Didn't expect to see you folks so soon," she said. "Coffee to start? Please," Miriam replied. "And would it be possible to have some water for our dog? He's very well behaved. The owner's not here tonight. I'll bring a bowl, but keep him under the table, okay?" When she returned with coffee and a small bowl of water, Mercedes lingered. "You're running from something," she observed. Edgar stiffened defensively, but Miriam placed a calming hand on his arm. "Starting over," she corrected gently. "My grandmother, she lives with me. 83 years old, memories are starting to go. My sister says put her in a home, but," she shook her head, "family takes care of family. That's how I was raised." "Not everyone shares your values," Edgar said. "No," Mercedes agreed. "That's why those who do must stick together." She glanced around the nearly empty diner. "You can stay until my shift ends at 7. Order something small every couple hours so it looks right. Use the bathroom to freshen up if you need. I'll keep your coffee full." Before they could properly thank her, she moved away to attend to another customer, leaving them with this small kindness that felt monumental in their circumstances. They ordered the cheapest menu item, toast with jam, and nursed their coffee, grateful for warmth and temporary sanctuary. As the night deepened toward morning, they observed their fellow night dwellers, a homeless veteran with a cardboard sign propped beside him, a young mother with a feverish child sleeping across her lap, 2 truck drivers discussing routes between bites of early breakfast. Around 3 a.m., Edgar excused himself to use the restroom. When he didn't return after 10 minutes, Miriam began to worry. She found him in the narrow hallway outside the bathrooms, leaning against the wall, face ashen. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Just dizzy," he assured her. "Forgot to take my blood pressure medication with all the excitement." Miriam's heart sank. In their careful planning, they had inventoried medications but neglected to keep them accessible during transit. Edgar's pills were packed in the suitcase. She helped him back to their booth, then discreetly retrieved his medication from the luggage. As he swallowed the pill with water, the vulnerability of their situation struck her anew. They weren't just houseless seniors, they were medically fragile individuals without healthcare access, far from their doctors and support systems. "Maybe we should call Rebecca," she suggested quietly. "She's far enough removed from Jasper's influence." Edgar shook his head. "Australia is literally the other side of the world. What could she do from there, except worry? And international calls can be traced. We need a plan beyond anywhere but here," Miriam acknowledged. They spent the next hour mapping possibilities. Large cities offered more services but higher costs and greater visibility. Rural areas might provide cheaper living but fewer resources for seniors. Warm climates would be kinder to Edgar's arthritis, but might mean more expensive tourist destinations. "We need somewhere small enough to stretch our dollars but large enough to offer some employment possibilities," Edgar reasoned. "Employment? Edgar, you're 75 with a replaced hip, and I'm 72. Age is just a number," he insisted. "I can still work with my hands. You're still the best baker I've ever known. We have skills." Miriam wanted to believe him. The alternative, accepting they'd made a catastrophic mistake in leaving, was too devastating to contemplate. As dawn began lightening the sky outside the diner, the door's bell jangled again. A large man entered, his substantial frame filling the doorway momentarily before he moved toward the counter. He was perhaps late 60s, with a military short gray haircut and the straight-backed posture of someone who'd spent years in uniform. His plaid flannel shirt and worn jeans suggested a working man rather than a retiree who'd let himself go. Mercedes greeted him by name morning. "Frank." "The usual?" before pouring coffee without waiting for confirmation. Frank Kowalski settled onto a counterstool with a grunt, unfolding a paper map rather than looking at a phone like most people would. This detail caught Edgar's attention, a fellow analog soul in a digital world. When Mercedes brought a plate loaded with eggs, bacon, and toast, she leaned across the counter for a brief, quiet exchange. Frank's eyes flicked toward Edgar and Miriam's booth, his expression unreadable before returning to his breakfast. "I think we've been discussed," Edgar muttered. Miriam sipped her coffee. "We're not exactly inconspicuous elderly couple with luggage and a dog at 4 a.m. 20 minutes later, as Frank was paying his bill, he detoured to their booth instead of the exit. Up close, his face revealed more character, deep creases around piercing blue eyes, a scar bisecting one eyebrow, and an expression that suggested he didn't waste words on trivialities. "Mercedes says you folks might need a ride somewhere," he said. Edgar straightened. "We're fine, thank you. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like two seniors who've hit a rough patch and could use a hand." "We don't accept help from strangers." Frank Kowalski. Vietnam, 1971-73. Purple Heart recipient. "Now I drive trucks and mind my own business." He extended a hand. "There. Not strangers anymore. I'm Miriam Thornfield. This is my husband, Edgar." "Where are you headed?" Frank asked. "We're exploring options," Miriam answered. "That's a fancy way of saying nowhere in particular or running from something. Either way, I'm driving to Millbrook, about 4 hours east. It's not much, but it's quiet, and the cost of living won't kill you. You're welcome to ride along." Edgar's instinct was immediate refusal. "Why would you help complete strangers?" he asked. "In Nam, we had a saying, you never leave a man behind. That goes for civilians too, especially ones who've served their country and families their whole lives." He shrugged. "Besides, I could use the company. Get lonely on the road." "What about Rusty?" Miriam asked. "That old retriever? He looks better behaved than most people I know." Frank checked his watch. "I'm leaving in 15 minutes. The offer stands until then." He returned to the counter, giving them space to decide. "We don't know anything about him," Edgar objected. "We don't know anything about anywhere right now," Miriam countered. "But Mercedes vouched for him, and 4 hours east puts significant distance between us and Josie's plans. What's in Millbrook? No idea, but we have limited funds and need to stretch them. A free ride saves us bus fare and buys us time. I never thought we'd be dependent on strangers' kindness at our age. Sometimes pride is a luxury we can't afford." 15 minutes later, they were loading their luggage into Frank's pickup truck, a well-maintained older model with a spacious extended cab. Rusty hopped into the back seat as if he'd been riding in trucks his whole life, settling on a blanket Frank produced from behind the seat. "He can have that," Frank said. "It's seen worse than some golden retriever fur." As they pulled away from the diner, Miriam glanced back to see Mercedes watching from the window. She raised a hand in farewell, and the waitress returned the gesture, ships passing in the night, connected briefly by recognition of shared humanity. As urban congestion gave way to rolling countryside, Frank finally spoke. "So what's your story? Mercedes thought you might be escaping a bad situation." Edgar tensed, but Miriam recognized the value of limited honesty. "Our son's wife decided we were inconvenient," she said. "She was planning to have us declared incompetent and institutionalized while taking control of our remaining assets, financial elder abuse. It's more common than people think. We gave them everything," Edgar added. "Sold our home to save their house from foreclosure, and this is how they repaid us." Frank nodded. "Family can be the cruelest betrayers because they know exactly where to plant the knife." As miles accumulated beneath the wheels, conversation gradually flowed more naturally. Frank revealed he was a widower. His wife, Margaret, had died of breast cancer 8 years earlier. They'd had no children, a source of regret that had intensified with her passing. "Now it's just me and my mother," he explained. "She's 89, beginning to show signs of dementia. Lives in a little house in Millbrook I bought for her years ago." "You care for her?" Miriam asked. Not as well as I should. I'm on the road most weeks. Neighbors check in, and I pay a local girl to clean and stock her fridge. He hesitated before admitting, been considering assisted living lately. She's forgetting to turn off the stove, wandering outside in her nightgown. That's why we ran, Edgar said. Because we'd rather face uncertainty than lose our independence against our will. In Nam, I had to leave men behind once. Heard their voices on the radio as they were overrun. Swore I'd never abandon anyone who needed me again. By mid-morning, they'd settled into a rhythm. Frank would drive for 2 hours, then stop at rest areas where Rusty could stretch his legs. They shared the food Mercedes had packed for them, sandwiches and fruit that tasted like the finest cuisine after their night of anxiety and travel. During these breaks, Frank consulted maps and made phone calls, often stepping away for privacy. During one such call, Edgar overheard fragments that suggested Frank was canceling some previous arrangement, something about reconsidering options and trying a different approach. The countryside transformed as they traveled east, lush forests giving way to farmland, then more rugged terrain with rocky outcroppings and stands of pine. The temperature dropped slightly, bringing crisp air through partially opened windows. Around noon, they stopped at a small-town diner different from any tourist establishment. The wooden building wore decades of weather with dignity, its hand-painted sign proclaiming Rose's Place in faded letters. Inside, vinyl booths hosted locals who barely glanced up as they entered. An elderly woman with improbably dark hair approached, greeting Frank by name. "Long time no see, stranger," she said. "Your usual table's open." "Thanks, Rose. Got room for 3 today. And maybe some water for the dog?" Rose Patterson, 78 and proprietor for nearly 50 years, assessed Edgar and Miriam with shrewd eyes. "Friends of yours, Frank?" "Getting there," he replied. Rose led them to a corner booth with a view of rolling hills beyond the parking lot. As they settled in, she disappeared briefly, returning with a bowl of water and 3 menus. "Special meatloaf," she announced. The simple declaration carried pride earned through decades of feeding travelers and locals alike. They all ordered the special, recognizing genuine quality when presented. While waiting for their food, Rose lingered, curiosity evident. "You folks just passing through?" Edgar hesitated, but Miriam answered with calm dignity. "We're between chapters at the moment, looking for somewhere to write the next one. Been there myself. My husband died, the kids moved away, thought my story was finished. Turns out it was just changing direction." She gestured around the diner. "Been running this place alone for 30 years now. Not what I planned, but it's a good life. How did you know to keep going? Sometimes you gotta lose everything to find out what you're really worth. The stripping away, it hurts like hell, but afterward, you see what's left is the real you." She patted Miriam's hand. "And honey, the real you is always enough." "Interesting woman," Frank commented, watching Rose greet truckers by name at the counter. "Owns half this town but lives in a room behind the kitchen. Says, wealth is for using, not hoarding." Their meal arrived, generous portions of home-cooked food that reminded Miriam of Sunday dinners in their old house. As they ate, locals nodded greetings to Frank, occasionally stopping to exchange brief pleasantries. When they finished eating, Rose refused to let them pay. "Frank saved my grandson from going to jail after a stupid teenage mistake," she explained. "His meals are always on the house, and that extends to his friends." "These small towns," Edgar mused, watching farms and woodland pass outside the window. "They have a different rhythm than the city." Frank nodded. "People know each other. Notice when someone's missing or needs help. It's not perfect, plenty of gossip and grudges carried for generations. But there's something to be said for being somewhere your absence would be noted." The observation struck Miriam forcefully. In Jasper's house, despite being family, their presence had been treated as an imposition. The idea of being somewhere they were actually wanted, where their contributions might be valued rather than tolerated, held powerful appeal. "What's Millbrook like?" she asked. "Dying, if we're honest. Population 847 and declining. Young people leave for college and don't come back. Storefronts downtown are more empty than occupied these days." He paused, then added, but the bones are good. Victorian architecture, town square with original gazebo, decent library. It just needs new blood and fresh ideas. Doesn't sound promising for seniors seeking economic opportunities, Edgar remarked. Depends what you're looking for, Frank countered. Cost of living's a fraction of the city. People with skills, real skills, not just computer degrees, are valued. A handyman who knows old houses can write his own ticket. Someone who bakes like it matters can draw customers from 3 counties. As afternoon stretched toward evening, the topic shifted to more immediate concerns, where Edgar and Miriam would stay upon reaching Millbrook, how they'd access their medications, what Rusty would need. There's a motel, Frank offered. Nothing fancy, but clean. About $40 a night, Edgar calculated mentally. At that rate, their funds would last longer, but still only about 3 weeks. And after that? He asked. Let's cross that bridge when we reach it. Sometimes solutions appear when you stop looking so hard. The philosophical approach seemed out of character for the practical veteran, but they recognized wisdom in allowing future concerns to remain in the future. Right now, they needed rest, safety, and time to regroup. Around 4 p.m., Frank received a phone call that changed the atmosphere in the truck. He answered with obvious tension, listening more than speaking, his free hand gripping the steering wheel until knuckles whitened. Yes, I understand it's short notice, he said, but circumstances have changed. No, she's still declining, but I'm reconsidering options. Yes, I'm aware of the deposit. That's my decision to make. When he disconnected, the silence in the truck was heavy with unasked questions. Frank cleared his throat. That was Sunny Pines Assisted Living. I had a room reserved for my mother. Starting tomorrow. Edgar straightened. You're putting your mother in a home? Frank corrected. Canceled it just now. Why? Miriam asked softly. Because watching you two fight for your dignity reminded me of something important. There are other ways to handle aging parents than locking them away. What will you do instead? Edgar asked. Called my dispatcher earlier. Taking a regional route instead of long haul. It means less money but more nights at home. Frank shrugged, thinking about moving in with her instead of the other way around. Her house has enough room, and I'm tired of motel rooms and truck stops. As they approached the final stretch toward Millbrook, fatigue began taking its toll. Edgar dozed against the window, while Miriam fought to keep her eyes open. The past 24 hours had drained them physically and emotionally. Frank seemed to understand, keeping the radio low and driving with careful smoothness to avoid disturbing them. When Edgar's head lolled uncomfortably, Frank reached back for a rolled jacket, passing it to Miriam, who gently positioned it as a pillow. The small kindness spoke volumes about their driver's character. Whatever had motivated Frank Kowalski to help 2 stranded seniors, it ran deeper than casual charity or momentary pity. As sunset painted the sky in amber and rose, Millbrook appeared on the horizon. The small town nestled in a valley, church spires and the courthouse dome rising above 2-story buildings that lined what was clearly the main street. Street lamps flickered on as dusk gathered, creating pools of golden light that dotted the town like fireflies. Welcome to Millbrook, Frank announced. Population 847, according to the sign. Though I think old Jenkins passed last winter, so might be 846 now. The casual reference to knowing each resident personally struck Edgar and Miriam simultaneously. This wasn't anonymity. This was community in its most fundamental form. They drove down Main Street, a classic small-town thoroughfare with brick buildings dating from the early Villable 1900s. Many storefronts displayed for lease signs, confirming Frank's assessment of economic decline, but others showed signs of life. A hardware store with rocking chairs displayed on the sidewalk, a small bookshop with lights still on, a barber shop where elderly men gathered even after closing time. Frank pointed out landmarks as they passed. The library with its limestone columns, the courthouse where he'd gotten his marriage license 30 years ago, the volunteer fire department that doubled as a community center for bingo nights. Best food in 3 counties, Frank explained. Dorothy May serves breakfast all day and makes pies that people drive 50 miles to purchase. Thanksgiving week. There's a line out the door just for her pecan pie. They continued 2 blocks beyond to the Millbrook Inn, a modest motel that had seen better days but maintained a tidy appearance. The vacancy sign flickered welcomingly against the deepening twilight. "Let me check if they have a ground floor room," Frank offered, with Edgar's hip. The thoughtfulness reinforced their growing trust in this unexpected ally. Frank returned with keys to a first-floor room. $38 a night, includes basic breakfast. I explained about Rusty. There's a $10 pet deposit, but the owner likes dogs. As they unloaded their luggage, exhaustion hit in earnest. The adrenaline that had sustained them through escape and journey was depleted, leaving bone-deep weariness in its wake. Frank seemed to understand without explanation. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out next steps. Before leaving, he scribbled his phone number on a gas receipt. "I'm staying at my mother's house on Elm Street, the yellow Victorian with blue trim. Call if you need anything. I'll stop by tomorrow afternoon to check on you." The room was basic but clean, 2 double beds with floral bedspreads straight from the 1990s. A small table with 2 chairs, a dresser with a TV that probably still had actual knobs, and a bathroom with avocado green fixtures that had outlived several design trends. Rusty circled twice on the rug beside one bed before collapsing with a contented sigh, apparently less troubled by their circumstances than they were. Edgar sank onto the bed. "What have we done, Miriam?" She sat beside him. "Exactly what we had to do. No one will declare us incompetent here. No, but we might starve instead. We're in a town we don't know, with limited funds, no medical care established, no income prospects, and winter eventually coming. We're together. We have our dignity. We'll figure out the rest." Outside their window, crickets began their evening chorus. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes sounded a gentle, random melody. A dog barked and was answered by another farther away. As darkness settled completely, Edgar and Miriam prepared for sleep, following routines established through decades of marriage despite the unfamiliar surroundings. They took medications, brushed teeth, and changed into night clothes. When they finally lay side by side in the darkness, physical exhaustion battled with active minds. So much had happened in 24 hours: betrayal, escape, unexpected kindness from strangers. "I keep thinking about the children," Miriam admitted. "Ivy will be so confused about why we left." Edgar's sigh was heavy. "I hope they'll remember us kindly, that Josie won't poison their memories. Maybe someday, when they're older," Jasper will explain. "Try to sleep," Edgar murmured. As they drifted toward slumber, the strangeness of their situation remained. But beneath it, something unexpected had taken root, a tiny seed of possibility. Perhaps, in this unforeseen detour, they might find not just refuge, but purpose. Dawn arrived with disorienting brightness through unfamiliar curtains. For several moments, Miriam lay still, piecing together their situation from fragments of memory. The midnight escape, Frank's truck, Millbrook's quiet streets, the motel room with its dated decor. Reality assembled itself slowly. They were essentially homeless, unemployed seniors in an unknown town, with limited resources and uncertain prospects, yet sunshine streamed through thin curtains, casting optimistic patterns across the worn carpet. Rusty stretched lazily beside the bed, tail thumping in greeting. Edgar's breathing remained deep, and even beside her, the first truly restful sleep he'd had in months, untroubled by anxiety about Josie's judgmental presence. Miriam slipped quietly from bed, padding to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized, silver hair uncombed, face lined with fatigue, eyes shadowed by recent stress. "We are not finished yet," she told her reflection firmly. After washing up, she dressed and took Rusty for a brief walk around the motel grounds. Morning revealed more details of their temporary home: a small swimming pool covered for the season, a modest garden with benches, a breakfast room adjoining the office where the smell of coffee beckoned. The motel owner, a wiry man in his 60s named Howard Jenkins, greeted her warmly when she entered for breakfast. "You must be Mrs. Thornfield. Frank called this morning to make sure you settled in okay." He gestured to a simple buffet of muffins, cereal, and fruit. "Help yourself. Coffee's fresh." The casual mention of Frank's concern touched her. In less than 24 hours, they'd acquired an advocate in this community, someone who remembered their existence and cared about their welfare. She returned to their room with coffee, for Edgar, and muffins for them both. He was awake and moving cautiously. "Sleep well?" she asked. He nodded. "Better than I expected. You?" "Well enough. The owner seems nice." Frank called to check on us. "Our trucker guardian angel continues his watch." They ate quietly, gazing out the window at Millbrook Awakening. Morning traffic consisted of pickup trucks and sedans at least a decade old, drivers offering casual waves to pedestrians. "What's our plan?" Edgar finally asked. "First, we need to understand this place better. See what opportunities might exist." Frank mentioned Dorothy May's Diner as a hub of sorts. "Perhaps we start there, get a feel for the community. And we need to locate a pharmacy for our prescriptions. My blood pressure medication has maybe 10 days left." "And a bank," Miriam added. "We should establish a local account with what funds we have. It looks more permanent than carrying cash." By mid-morning, they had checked off their most pressing concerns. The local pharmacy could transfer their prescriptions from their previous providers, though without insurance, the costs would be substantial. The Millbrook Community Bank had opened a basic account for them with minimal paperwork. Howard at the motel had agreed to a weekly rate that would stretch their funds a bit further. Each small accomplishment bolstered their confidence. They weren't helpless, despite their circumstances. Around 11, they made their way to Dorothy May's Diner for an early lunch. The establishment occupied a converted Victorian storefront, its large windows offering views of the town square across the street. Inside, the decor blended nostalgic 1950s elements with practical comfort: red vinyl booths, a gleaming counter with swivel stools, black and white checkered floor. But touches of personality elevated it above cookie-cutter retro local artwork adorned walls, fresh flowers graced each table, and hand-lettered specials featured creative offerings beyond standard diner fare. The lunch crowd was beginning to gather, a mix of locals in work clothes, a few business people in more formal attire, and seniors enjoying unhurried meals. They found a small booth near the window and settled in, Rusty curling beneath the table out of foot traffic paths. Their server approached a woman, perhaps 6, with silver-streaked auburn hair piled in a practical bun and reading glasses dangling from a beaded chain around her neck. Her name tag identified her as Dorothy May herself, confirming this was no corporate establishment but a proprietor-run business. "You must be Frank's friends," she said. "He called to say you might stop by." Her direct gaze assessed them with interest rather than suspicion. "What can I get you folks to drink while you look at the menu?" They ordered iced tea and studied menus featuring comfort food with unexpected twists. Meatloaf included roasted red peppers, mac and cheese incorporated 3 artisanal varieties, and the soup of the day was carrot ginger bisque. When Dorothy May returned with their drinks, she lingered. "Frank mentioned you're considering Millbrook for retirement. Smart choice, cost of living's reasonable, weather's not too extreme, and we're just far enough from the interstate to keep things quiet without being isolated." "We're exploring options," Edgar replied. "We've downsized recently and are looking for somewhere different." Dorothy May nodded sagely. "Millbrook's definitely different. Not for everyone, mind you. We don't have shopping malls or movie theaters, but we've got community, clean air, and housing prices that won't give you a heart attack." They placed lunch orders, and Dorothy May moved on to other customers. As they ate excellent sandwiches, they observed the diner's rhythm. Dorothy May greeted most patrons by name, asked about family members, remembered dietary preferences without being reminded. "This is the town's living room," Miriam murmured. "Notice how people linger. Tables get pushed together as friends arrive. Business gets conducted over pie." Edgar nodded, seeing what she observed. Unlike city restaurants where efficiency and turnover drove service, Dorothy May's operated on a different economy, one where relationships held equal value to revenue. When they finished eating, Dorothy May returned with their check and an unexpected question. I don't suppose either of you has experience in food service? I managed our church's weekly community dinners for 15 years, Miriam offered, and I've always baked extensively. Why do you ask? My morning baker quit yesterday, moving to be near her daughter's new baby, and my handyman retired last month after his hip replacement. At my age, I can't handle everything myself anymore. But finding reliable help in a town this size, what sort of handyman tasks? Edgar inquired. Basic maintenance, mostly fixing chairs, unclogging sinks, changing light fixtures. The building's over 100 years old, so something always needs attention. She glanced at Edgar. Frank mentioned, you're good with your hands. I managed maintenance for our church and community center for decades, Edgar acknowledged. Tell you what, if you're interested in some part-time work while you explore Millbrook, I could use help. Nothing formal, just cash under the table to start. See if we suit each other. We're staying at the motel currently, Miriam mentioned, uncertain about logistics. Transportation could be challenging. I've got an apartment upstairs that's been empty since my son moved to Chicago. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and furnished. Comes with the job if you want it. Rent would be reasonable, and you'd save on motel costs. Could we see the apartment? Edgar asked. Of course. Dorothy May agreed easily. I'll finish up the lunch rush, then show you upstairs. Take your time deciding, it's a big step. As she moved away, Edgar and Miriam conferred in low voices. It seems too perfect, Edgar murmured. Jobs and housing appearing just when we need them? Frank clearly spoke to her about us, Miriam reasoned. But the needs seem genuine. I watched her this morning. She's running this place practically single-handed, and an apartment would solve our housing concern. Stretch our funds considerably, plus give us purpose, Miriam added. By early afternoon, the lunch crowd had dispersed, and Dorothy May led them through a side door and up a narrow staircase to the apartment above the diner. The space revealed itself as they climbed a small landing opened to a surprisingly spacious living area with windows overlooking the town square. The furnishings were simple but of good quality: a comfortable sofa, reading chairs, solid oak dining table with 4 chairs. The kitchen, though compact, featured newer appliances and ample counter space. A short hallway led to a bathroom with updated fixtures and a bedroom large enough for a queen bed and dresser. Throughout, hardwood floors gleamed with care, and walls painted in warm cream created a welcoming atmosphere. My son lived here after college until he married and moved away, Dorothy May explained. I've rented it occasionally to seasonal workers, but lately it's been empty. Shame for wasting good space. Edgar examined details with professional interest: the solid construction, well-maintained woodwork, updated electrical outlets. The building has good bones, he observed approvingly. Dorothy May beamed at the assessment. 1,896 construction. They built things to last back then. Miriam was drawn to the kitchen. This is lovely for baking, she commented, already imagining possibilities. The apartment comes with utilities included, Dorothy May added. Heat's central, air conditioning is window units, but adequate. Laundry facilities are in the basement. And I don't mind dogs as long as they're well behaved. What would the work arrangement be? Edgar inquired. Dorothy May outlined her proposal. Miriam would handle morning baking starting at 5 a.m., preparing the day's bread, muffins, and pastries. Edgar would maintain the building, addressing repairs as needed, generally working mornings with afternoons free. Both positions would be part-time, paid hourly, with the apartment's reduced rent factored as partial compensation. It's not wealth building, she acknowledged, but it's honest work in exchange for fair pay and a decent place to live, plus all the coffee you can drink and 1 meal per shift. We'd like to discuss it privately, Edgar said. Of course, Dorothy May agreed easily. Take your time. I'm downstairs if you have questions. It would reduce our expenses significantly, Edgar calculated aloud. Motel is nearly $40 daily, so that's over $200 weekly saved, plus meals included with work. And it's not charity, Miriam emphasized. It's employment for which we're qualified, with housing as part of the compensation package. It's not what we planned for our retirement, Edgar said. Plans change, sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity, but we're still together, still capable, still needed. What about medical care? Edgar raised the practical concern. We can ask Dorothy May about local physicians. Small towns always have at least a general practitioner. They weighed options, considered alternatives, and ultimately recognized the opportunity before them offered the best immediate solution to their predicament. When they descended to the diner, Dorothy May looked up expectantly from wiping counters. "We'd like to accept your offer," Edgar announced, "on a trial basis, for both your protection and ours. 1 month to ensure the arrangement works for everyone." "Fair enough. When would you like to start?" "Tomorrow, if that works for you. We'll need today to collect our things from the motel. I'll have the apartment ready by this evening, and I'll show you both the ropes tomorrow morning, say 5 a.m. for Miriam, 7 a.m. for Edgar." As they walked back to the motel to gather their belongings and settle their bill, Millbrook revealed itself through afternoon activities, mail carriers greeting residents by name, children riding bicycles without parental hovering, elderly couples strolling at a measured pace along tree-lined sidewalks. "It reminds me of where I grew up," Miriam observed. Edgar nodded, noticing how passing drivers waved at pedestrians, how storekeepers swept sidewalks outside their establishments, how neighbors paused to converse rather than hurrying past. There's something to be said for smaller-scale living. At the motel, Howard expressed genuine pleasure at their good fortune. "Dorothy May's a fair employer and a decent landlord. You folks landed on your feet." They packed their few possessions, settled their bill, and waited for Frank, who had offered to drive them back to the diner with their luggage. He arrived precisely when promised, helping load their bags into his truck. "Dorothy May says you start tomorrow," he commented. "She doesn't offer that apartment to just anyone. You must have impressed her." "Or she's desperate for help," Edgar suggested. "A bit of both, probably. But it's a good match. She needs reliable people. You need stability. Sometimes the universe aligns things properly." By evening, they were settled into the apartment above Dorothy May's diner, their few possessions arranged to create immediate familiarity in the new space. Dorothy May had stocked the refrigerator with basics, milk, eggs, bread, fruit, and left a peach cobbler with a welcome note on the counter. Standing in the twilight by their windows, watching Millbrook's lights illuminate against deepening blue, Edgar slipped an arm around Miriam's waist. "Not where we expected to be," he acknowledged, but not without promise. "A new chapter," she agreed. "Let's see what tomorrow brings." Their first weeks in Millbrook unfolded with unexpected grace. The work at Dorothy May's suited them perfectly. Miriam rediscovered joy in creating breads and pastries that brought smiles to customers' faces, while Edgar found satisfaction in maintaining the historic building, applying skills honed over decades. Dorothy May proved an excellent employer, fair, appreciative, and respectful of their age without treating them as fragile or incompetent. The diner's regular customers welcomed them with typical small-town curiosity tempered by politeness. Questions about their past were general rather than probing, and their vague answers about downsizing after retirement were accepted without suspicion. Frank visited regularly, often bringing his mother, Elaine Kowalski, a bright-eyed woman whose occasional confusion was managed with gentle redirection rather than frustration. The decision to remain in her home with Frank's increased presence seemed to be working well for both of them. "I sleep better knowing Mom's under the same roof," Frank confided to Edgar one morning. By the end of their first month, patterns had established. Miriam rose at 4 a.m., baking until mid-morning when part-time helpers took over. Edgar worked from 7 a.m. until early afternoon, addressing maintenance issues and occasionally helping with lunch rush. Their afternoons were their own for exploring Millbrook, reading, or resting. Dorothy May insisted they join her for a meeting as their trial month concluded. "I'd like to make the arrangement permanent," she announced. "You've exceeded expectations. Customers love Miriam's baking, and Edgar's fixed things I didn't even know were broken. We'd like that." Miriam answered for both of them. "Sometimes the worst moments lead us where we need to be," she observed. "I know something about that myself." They didn't press for details, respecting privacy as theirs had been respected. But over the coming weeks, Dorothy May's story emerged in fragments. A difficult marriage ended by her husband's sudden death, adult children scattered to distant cities, the diner becoming both livelihood and purpose during lonely years. "We create a family where we find it," she told Miriam one morning. "Blood ties are just one kind of connection." The observation resonated deeply as Edgar and Miriam gradually integrated into Millbrook's community, Fabric. They joined the library's book club, attended community concerts in the park, and eventually accepted dinner invitations from new acquaintances. Edgar met Samuel Ross, 71, a retired furniture maker who still maintained a workshop behind his home. The men bonded over woodworking techniques, and Samuel offered access to his tools, a generosity that brought tears to Edgar's eyes the first time he held a properly weighted chisel again. "Been looking for someone who appreciates quality craftsmanship," Samuel explained. Under Samuel's mentorship, Edgar began restoring antique furniture for local residents, small projects that utilized his skills while accommodating his physical limitations. The modest income supplemented their diner wages, but more importantly, it reconnected him with his lifelong passion. Miriam similarly expanded beyond morning baking. She joined a quilting circle that met at the community center, sharing techniques accumulated over decades. When the elementary school sought volunteers for an after-school reading program, she offered her time, soon becoming a favorite with children who called her Grandma Miriam with casual affection. Rusty thrived in the small-town environment, where his presence was welcomed rather than tolerated. Dorothy May allowed him downstairs during slower periods, where he became the diner's unofficial greeter. "That dog's better therapy than most professionals," Dorothy May observed after Rusty spent an afternoon beside Mr. Jenkins, a widower whose grief often left him silent for days. Their apartment became truly home-like as they gradually acquired modest possessions, a better reading lamp, throw pillows in Miriam's favorite blue, a small radio for kitchen companionship during early baking hours. They weren't replacing what was lost, but creating something new that reflected their current circumstances and preferences. Financial stability increased as their reputation for reliability spread. Edgar received more furniture restoration requests than he could accommodate, allowing him to select projects that interested him most. Miriam's special order baked goods, particularly her cinnamon rolls and seasonal pies, generated extra income during holiday seasons. They opened a savings account, making small but regular deposits. Not enough to recapture their previous security, but sufficient to reduce anxiety about immediate survival. They established care with local physicians who adjusted medications to improve Edgar's mobility and Miriam's arthritis symptoms. In October, when early snow dusted Millbrook briefly before melting, Dorothy May approached them with an idea. "The diner gets busiest during the holiday season, tourists passing through, families gathering, gift shopping bringing folks downtown. I could use extra help, with appropriate compensation, of course. We'd be happy to increase hours temporarily," Edgar agreed, appreciating both the opportunity and the respectful way it was presented. As Thanksgiving approached, Dorothy May's prediction proved accurate. The diner hummed with increased activity, travelers stopping for famous pies, locals gathering for comfort food as temperatures dropped, holiday shoppers refueling between stores. Miriam's baking skills shone particularly bright during this season. Her pumpkin rolls sold out daily, and advance orders for Thanksgiving pies filled 3 notebooks. Edgar created a display system for the bakery case that showcased products while maximizing limited counter space. "You two are the best investment I've made in years," Dorothy May declared. The simple acknowledgement meant more than she could possibly know to be assets rather than burdens, contributors rather than dependents. After months of Josie's subtle diminishment, such recognition was profoundly healing. 1 week before Thanksgiving, as morning preparations began in pre-dawn darkness, Miriam glanced out the diner windows to see the season's first significant snowfall transforming Millbrook. Edgar joined her at the window, sliding an arm around her waist with familiar affection. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she nodded. "I was just thinking we've been here 5 months now. Feels both longer and shorter somehow. Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "I regret the circumstances that made it necessary. I regret losing daily contact with our grandchildren. But the decision itself?" He shook his head. "No. We preserved something essential: our dignity, our autonomy, our right to determine our own path. And we found something unexpected here. Not a replacement family, but community," Edgar supplied. Outside, Millbrook awakened to its snowy transformation. Early risers navigated freshly whitened sidewalks, shop owners cleared doorways, children detoured through the park to make first tracks in pristine snow. "We should call Rebecca for Thanksgiving," Miriam suddenly suggested. Edgar agreed readily. Their daughter in Australia had been reduced to occasional emails in recent years, geography and time zones creating natural distance. But perhaps now, with their lives stabilizing in this new configuration, bridges could be carefully rebuilt. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving brought Millbrook's first true winter storm, heavy snow driven by gusty winds that created drifts against buildings and reduced visibility to mere yards. Dorothy May's diner remained open despite the weather, a beacon of warmth serving comfort food to snowplow drivers, utility workers, and locals undeterred by blizzard conditions. Edgar had spent the morning securing exterior fixtures and ensuring walkways remained passable, while Miriam's baking filled the establishment with aromas of cinnamon, nutmeg, and fresh bread. By early afternoon, the lunch rush had diminished to a few hardy souls lingering over coffee, reluctant to face renewed snowfall. Dorothy May was tallying receipts at the counter when the front door opened, admitting a swirl of snowflakes and a tall figure bundled against the elements. The newcomer stomped snow from boots on the entry mat, unwound a scarf, and removed a knit cap to reveal a face that caused Miriam, emerging from the kitchen with fresh pie, to freeze mid-step. Jasper Thornfield stood in the doorway, his expression a complex mixture of relief, uncertainty, and exhaustion. Edgar, returning through the side entrance, stopped abruptly upon seeing his son. His hand tightened on the doorframe, knuckles whitening with sudden tension. For several heartbeats, no one moved. The diner's ambient sounds, coffee percolating, radio playing softly, wind rattling windows seemed to recede, as 3 generations of Thornfields regarded each other across unexpected distances. Dorothy May, reading the situation, quietly motioned remaining customers toward the register. "Folks, we've got a private matter here. How about I cash you out with a 20% weather discount?" The subtle intervention cleared the diner within minutes, leaving only Dorothy May, who retreated to the kitchen after a supportive nod toward Edgar and Miriam. Jasper removed his coat with slow, deliberate movements, as if concerned sudden gestures might trigger flight. He looked older than 5 months should account for new lines around his eyes, a certain heaviness in his posture suggesting accumulated stress. "Hello, Mom." "Dad." His voice carried both relief and apprehension. "It took a while to find you." Edgar found his voice first. "How did you?" "Private investigator, initially. Then veteran networks. Someone remembered Frank helping an elderly couple with a golden retriever. The trail led here." Miriam remained silent, pie still balanced in her hands like an offering with no recipient. 1,000 questions crowded her mind, but one dominated. Had Josie sent him to execute their capture and return? As if reading her thoughts, Jasper added, "I'm alone. Josie doesn't know I'm here." The assertion released some tension from Edgar's posture. "Why are you here, then? Could we sit? It's been a long drive." Miriam finally moved, setting the pie on a nearby table and gesturing toward a booth away from windows. Some deeply ingrained maternal instinct had her reaching for the coffee pot as they settled across from each other, the familiar action providing momentary refuge from emotional turbulence. "You're looking well," Jasper finally offered. "Both of you." Healthy. We are well, Edgar confirmed. I can see that. This town. It suits you somehow. The children? Miriam couldn't contain the inquiry, concerned for her grandchildren overriding caution. They miss you terribly. Ivy asks every day when you're coming home. Finn keeps your carved bird on his nightstand. We didn't want to leave them, Edgar said quietly. But we couldn't stay. Not after what we overheard. I know what Josie was planning. I didn't know the full extent until after you left. The lawyer's appointment, the competency hearing arrangements. She'd orchestrated everything without telling me details. You knew enough, Edgar observed. And you didn't stop it. No, Jasper admitted. I was weak, caught between loyalty to you and fear of losing my marriage, my family stability. I chose poorly. What happened after we left? Miriam asked. Chaos, initially. Josie was furious, not worried, furious. Her plans were derailed, and she hated losing control. The children were devastated, especially when Josie tried to convince them you'd abandon them because you didn't love them anymore. She said that to them? She tried. But Ivy's smarter. She said, Grandma would never stop loving me. Something bad must have happened. A ghost of a smile touched Jasper's lips. Out of the mouths of babes, right? Miriam's tears spilled over at last. That poor child. I started searching immediately, Jasper continued. But discreetly. Told Josie it was to reassure the children. But truthfully, I needed to know you were safe. That's when I discovered how extensive her planning had been. Edgar leaned forward. Explain. She'd been documenting supposed evidence of your decline for months, notes about Mom's memory lapses, your depression, medication confusion. She'd consulted an elder law attorney specializing in guardianship proceedings, had appointments scheduled with Dr. Martinez to provide medical support for competency challenges. The financial aspect, Miriam pressed. Was that real too? She'd already researched how to redirect your Social Security, pension, insurance proceeds, everything into accounts she would control as guardian. When I confronted her after finding her notes, she didn't even deny it, said it was practical financial management, since you'd clearly demonstrated poor judgment by giving everything to me. We gave everything to save your home, your children's stability. I know, Jasper acknowledged. I know that now, with absolute clarity, the shame of how we repaid that sacrifice. He paused, collecting himself. That's why I'm here. Not to bring you back, I can see you've built something meaningful here. But to apologize, to explain, to try to rebuild whatever connection might still be possible. What about Josie? Edgar asked. We're separated. It has been 2 months. The revelation startled both Edgar and Miriam. Because of us? Miriam asked. You were the catalyst, not the cause. Once I started questioning her actions toward you, other patterns became clear: financial manipulations, emotional control tactics, how she'd systematically isolated me from friends who disagreed with her. Your departure forced me to truly see what my marriage had become. He sipped his coffee before continuing. The final straw came when I discovered she'd been intercepting Rebecca's letters and emails for years. Our daughter wasn't neglecting contact. Josie was preventing it, claiming Rebecca's negative influence would disrupt family harmony. Edgar inhaled sharply. Rebecca's been trying to reach us? She's desperate to reconnect. I've updated her about finding you. Hope that's okay. She's trying to arrange a visit from Australia sometime next year. The possibility of seeing their daughter after so long brought fresh emotion to Miriam's eyes. Small pieces of their fractured family potentially reassembling, not as before, but in new configuration. And the children? She asked. With your separation. We have shared custody, Jasper explained. They're with me now, actually staying with a neighbor in town while I found you. I didn't want to bring them until I knew how you'd receive me. Edgar's expression revealed conflict. Josie allows them to see you? The court insists, Jasper replied. And the children's therapist has been clear that maintaining relationships with loving grandparents is essential for their well-being after the disruption they've experienced. Silence settled again, but its quality had shifted: less tension, more contemplation. Outside, snowfall began lightening, weak sunshine occasionally breaking through thinning clouds. I don't expect immediate forgiveness, Jasper said. "I don't deserve it, but I am asking for a chance to rebuild trust, to let the children know their grandparents didn't abandon them, to create some new version of family connection that respects your independence and acknowledges my failure." The raw honesty disarmed final defenses. Edgar reached across the table, briefly covering his son's hand with his own, the first physical contact since their reunion. "We'll need time," he said. "But family remains family, even through the worst storms." From the kitchen doorway, Dorothy May observed the tableau with quiet approval. When Miriam glanced her way, she offered a small nod of encouragement before discreetly withdrawing, understanding intuitively the sacred space of family reconciliation. "Would you like to meet the children?" Jasper asked. "They're just at the hotel on Maple Street. We could walk there once the snow lets up, or I could bring them here." "Bring them here," Miriam decided. "This is our home now, our workplace. They should see we're settled, not lost or suffering. They'll be overjoyed." Finn's been carrying that wooden bird everywhere, telling people his grandpa made it with magic hands. The simple report brought unexpected tears to Edgar's eyes. Despite everything, their connection to those children remained pure, uncorrupted by adult conflicts. When Jasper departed to retrieve Ivy and Finn, promising to return within the hour, Edgar and Miriam remained at the booth, emotions too complex for immediate processing. Dorothy May emerged from the kitchen, coffee pot in hand for refills. "Family's complicated," she observed. "Takes courage to attempt repair after damage." Edgar nodded slowly, not sure where this leads. But they're family," Miriam completed. "Life rarely gives perfect solutions," Dorothy May continued. "But sometimes it offers workable ones, if we're brave enough to try." As she returned to the kitchen, Edgar reached for Miriam's hand across the table. "Are we doing the right thing? Opening this door again?" "I think we're doing the human thing. Imperfect, risky, but potentially healing." When Jasper returned 40 minutes later, he was accompanied by two small whirlwinds of energy who burst through the diner door ahead of him. 5-year-old Ivy, her dark braids trailing behind her, spotted them immediately. "Grandma! Grandpa!" she shrieked, launching herself across the space with reckless abandon. 4-year-old Finn followed slightly more cautiously, clutching a familiar wooden bird in one mittened hand, eyes wide with mingled hope and uncertainty. The impact of Ivy's small body colliding with Miriam released something long frozen inside her. Arms automatically encircling her granddaughter, she breathed in the familiar scent of children's shampoo and winter cold, feeling tiny arms squeeze with desperate strength around her neck. "You came back," Ivy whispered against her ear. Edgar knelt despite his protesting hip, opening arms to Finn, who approached with the solemn intensity particular to young boys managing big emotions. "Is that my bird?" Edgar asked gently. Finn nodded. "I kept him safe. He sleeps by my bed so I don't forget you. I've missed you, my boy," he murmured. "Every single day." Jasper watched from the doorway, snowflakes melting on his shoulders, eyes suspiciously bright. The scene before him, his parents reunited with his children, represented both failure and hope. Failure in his duty to protect family bonds, hope in the possibility of healing what his weakness had damaged. From behind the counter, Dorothy May discreetly wiped her own eyes before busying herself with unnecessary coffee preparation. Rusty, who had been napping in his corner, rose to investigate the commotion, his arthritic movements quickening at the scent of familiar children. "Rusty!" Both children cried in unison, transferring their excitement to the elderly dog who received their attention with dignified patience, tail sweeping in slow arcs of contentment. The noise attracted the attention of several passers-by, who peered through clearing windows with undisguised curiosity at the emotional reunion unfolding in their local diner. Over the children's heads, Edgar met his son's gaze directly. No words were needed. Acknowledgement passed between them of damage done and bridges tentatively rebuilt. Not forgiveness yet, but openness to possibility. Not restoration of what was lost, but creation of something new from remaining foundations. As the afternoon progressed, practical matters emerged through emotional reconciliation, Jasper had taken a week's leave from work to make this journey, renting a small cabin at Millbrook's Edge for the duration. He'd brought several boxes of Edgar and Miriam's possessions rescued from storage photo albums they'd thought lost forever. Edgar's specialized woodworking tools, Miriam's cherished recipe collection, items of sentimental value that couldn't be replaced. "I thought you might want these, whatever you decided about seeing me," he explained. The gesture represented understanding, not attempting to reclaim them, but supporting the life they'd chosen to build, independently. Dorothy May, with characteristic practicality, suggested dinner for everyone once the diner closed to regular customers. "Family should break bread together," she declared, the simple wisdom cutting through lingering awkwardness. As evening settled over snow-blanketed Millbrook, the diner transformed from public establishment to private gathering space. Dorothy May prepared comfort food that appealed to all generations: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon, rolls still warm from the oven. Miriam contributed apple pie for dessert, teaching Ivy to crimp edges as they worked side by side in the kitchen. Frank Kowalski and his mother joined them at Dorothy May's invitation, the trucker's role in their journey, making him integral to the full circle moment. Samuel Ross arrived bearing a small wooden train he'd crafted for Finn, and several other Millbrook residents stopped by briefly, curious about the visitors but respectful of family boundaries. Watching his grandchildren interact comfortably with their new community, Edgar experienced an unexpected revelation. The relationship needn't be binary, either living with Jasper or completely separated. Perhaps this middle path, independent lives with deliberate connection, offered a better solution than they'd imagined during their desperate flight. As dinner concluded and children grew drowsy from excitement and travel, Jasper broached the question hovering beneath the evening's warmth. "I know you've built lives here," he began. "I'm not asking you to abandon that. But is there room for us in your new world? Regular visits, perhaps? Maybe I could look for property nearby for weekend trips?" Miriam glanced at Edgar, receiving his slight nod of agreement before responding. "We'd like that," she said simply. "The children need stability, not confusion. Regular contact on neutral ground seems wise. And Rebecca?" Edgar added. "When will she visit Australia?" "Of course," Jasper agreed readily. "She's eager to reconnect with both of you. Her husband's work contract ends next year, and they're considering returning stateside permanently." The possibility of their daughter's closer proximity added another dimension to the emerging family reconfiguration, fractured pieces, potentially reassembling in a new pattern that honored the past without being constrained by it. As the evening concluded, practical arrangements were discussed. Jasper and the children would remain in Millbrook through Thanksgiving, participating in the holiday meal Dorothy May had planned at the diner for strays and family alike. Future visits would be scheduled with reasonable frequency, perhaps monthly to start, with longer stays during school holidays. When Jasper prepared to take increasingly sleepy children back to their rental cabin, Ivy clung to Miriam with sudden desperation. "You won't disappear again?" she asked. "No, sweetheart. Grandpa and I live here now, in the apartment upstairs, but you can visit us, and we'll always answer your calls. Promise?" Finn joined his sister. "We promise, and Thornfields keep their promises." The simple exchange represented a covenant not just with the children but with Jasper, who watched with evident emotion. After final hugs and assurances of tomorrow's reunion, Jasper departed with the children, leaving Edgar and Miriam to process the day's unexpected developments with their Millbrook family. "Well," Frank observed dryly, "when you Thornfields do family drama, you don't hold back." The comment broke tension lingering after emotional intensity, drawing surprised laughter from Edgar and Miriam. Dorothy May swatted Frank's arm with a dish towel, but her eyes twinkled with agreement. "It's a beginning," Samuel Ross noted, his carpenter's perspective evident. "Good restoration starts with assessing damage honestly, then rebuilding with stronger joints than before." As their friends departed into the snowy evening, Edgar and Miriam climbed the stairs to their apartment, emotional exhaustion competing with cautious optimism. Rusty followed slowly, his elderly joints stiffened by excitement and weather changes. In their small living room, Edgar sank into his favorite chair while Miriam made tea, the familiar ritual providing comfort amid emotional turbulence. "I never expected this resolution," Edgar admitted. "I thought we'd either remain entirely separate from them or eventually be forced to return on Josie's terms." Miriam nodded. "Life rarely offers the endings we anticipate. Is it an ending, though?" Edgar mused. "I keep thinking about what Rose Patterson told us months ago," Miriam said. "Sometimes you gotta lose everything to find out what you're really worth." "We lost much," he acknowledged, "but perhaps not everything. And what we've found here has its own value," she completed. They sipped tea in companionable silence, contemplating the day's unexpected gifts, grandchildren's unconditional love, son's genuine remorse, community's steadfast support. Not the retirement they'd planned, but perhaps something equally meaningful in different configurations. As they prepared for sleep that night, Edgar paused at their bedroom window, gazing out at Millbrook's snow-covered square. The storm had passed completely, leaving crystalline clarity in its wake. Stars punctuated velvet darkness above the town, sharp and brilliant in winter's clean air. "Remember that first night in the bus station?" he asked. Miriam joined him at the window. "I remember being terrified but determined. We've come so far since then, in more ways than distance." Below their window, Millbrook slept peacefully, the town that had offered refuge when they most needed it, community when they felt most alone, purpose when they feared uselessness. Not a replacement for what was lost, but genuine home nonetheless. "Whatever comes next," Edgar murmured, arm encircling his wife's shoulders. "We face it together." Miriam nodded. "Together," she echoed, "the only way we know." Outside, a gentle wind stirred bare branches against the starlit sky, nature's reminder that even in winter's apparent stillness, life continues its constant transformation, like the town below, like the family reconnecting against odds, like two elders who'd found courage to begin again when most would simply surrender.